Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're taking a bit of a plunge into an industry that's really creative, very personal, but also, maybe surprisingly, super bureaucratic.
Yeah, we're talking about the world of professional beauty, hair, skin, nails.
Exactly. We're looking at the really specific, highly numerical rules that govern these professionals.
It's funny, you think of a salon, maybe a spa,
Yeah.
and you think, art, relaxation.
Right.
But when you actually look at the source material, and we're basing this on the Kentucky revised statutes and their administrative regulations, it's basically a public health code, like a really detailed safety curriculum.
And we're using these Kentucky codes because they're just, excellent examples, really detailed, showing how states put these very stringent, very numerical systems in place. They're some of the toughest in the U.S., really.
Hmm.
So our mission for you, listening in, is to get a quick handle on the precise legal boundaries here. You know, the difference between a cosmetologist, a limited stylist, an esthetician, and how licensing even works if you move around.
It's kind of the pH of professionalism, you could say.
Yeah.
Let's unpack this.
Okay, let's dive into segment one, defining the scope. Where beauty meets bureaucracy, I guess.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, cosmetology, it's this big umbrella term, covers a lot of ground. What's the state's big picture legal definition?
Well, it's broad, but it's also pretty precise. Cosmetology generally covers hairstyling, aesthetics, and nail technology.
Okay.
But here's what's really crucial for professionals to know. The practice explicitly does not include anything done as part of treating an illness or disease.
Ah, right. So you're firmly in the cosmetic lane, not the medical one.
Exactly. Stay in your lane. That clarity is vital.
Okay, that makes sense. But this is where the details really start popping, right? The specializations, like aesthetic practices, that sounds like more than just putting on makeup.
Oh, absolutely. Way more.
Yeah.
The official definition, it covers the standard things,
Yeah.
facials, waxing, tinting, massaging the skin, eyelash extensions. But it actually goes further. It includes providing preoperative and postoperative aesthetic skincare.
Really?
Yeah, and this is the big but, only if you're specifically referred or supervised by a licensed medical professional.
Okay, so there's a clear link to the medical field, but with strict oversight.
Precisely. It shows the state recognizing, how close the cosmetic field can get to actual medicine, and they want controls there.
And I imagine the definition for hairstyling is just as buttoned up.
Yep, defined by practice like arranging, coloring, cutting, permanent waving, the core services. Every single service basically has its own legal tag.
And this very segmented approach, this is where we see these narrower licenses starting to emerge, right? That seems like a big trend.
It is. It's led to things like the limited stylist license.
Right. That one's fascinating because it looks like a faster way into the industry, but the limits seem incredibly strict.
They are. The limited stylist license often is just for shampoo and style.
Right.
It's defined almost by what it excludes.
Okay.
So they could do basic cleaning, curling, dressing hair, blow drying, the basics. But the law explicitly says no color services, no cutting, no chemical services, no lightening, and not even popular treatments like, say, a Brazilian blowout.
Huh. Why create such a limited license? Is it purely about getting people working faster, a lower barrier?
It seems like it serves maybe two purposes.
Yeah.
One, it lets people specialize quickly in things that are in high demand but maybe lower risk, like, blow-dry bars or texture management.
Right.
And it definitely lowers the time commitment needed up front, which we'll get to. But the trade-off for that quick entry is zero wiggle room on your scope. You cross that line, say, you apply color, you're practicing illegally. Simple as that.
Wow. Okay. And then beyond even those licenses, there are separate permits for things like threading or makeup artistry.
Correct. Even for these super niche things, threading, makeup artistry, eyelash artistry,
Yeah.
you still need a separate permit. You have to show proof of specialized training, sanitation courses.
Even if the service seems less complex than full cosmetology.
Yeah. It shows the regulators are still focused on public health. Even for services they're carving out from that massive 1,500-hour requirement, they want oversight.
Got it. And just to wrap up this definition part, there's one big exception we should mention.
Oh, right. Natural hair braiding.
Mm.
That's explicitly exempt from these licensing chapter requirements. It's recognized more as a traditional practice.
Okay, interesting distinction. So once you figure out which specific license or permit you need, the next step is actually getting it. Segment 2, the path to licensure. Very quantifiable.
Yep, lots of numbers here.
What's the absolute baseline, the starting point for everyone?
Okay, the baseline is pretty consistent across the board. Cosmetologist, esthetician, nail tech, You have to be at least 18 years old.
Okay.
And you need a high school diploma or a GED or, an equivalent score on an adult education test. That maturity and basic education level,
Yep.
non-negotiable.
Right. Now, for the big numbers, everyone talks about the required training hours. This seems like the clearest legal line separating the different roles based on skill and risk.
Absolutely. The hours are the real differentiator. So for a full cosmetologist license,
Yeah.
you're looking at 1,500 total hours.
1,500. Wow.
Yeah. And within that, there's a minimum of 375 hours of theory or lecture.
Just practically speaking, 1,500 hours. What does that translate to? Like full-time school?
You're looking at roughly maybe 8 to 10 months if you're going full-time, 40 hours a week. It's a huge commitment.
Why so high? Is 1,500 just a historical number, or does the state really think that much time directly translates to safer practice? Or maybe it's also just, a barrier to make sure people are serious.
It's probably a mix of all that. I mean, the number reflects how much you need to learn, right? Hair cutting, chemical applications, which have real risks, sanitation, anatomy, even some business stuff.
Okay.
It's the state basically saying, look, if you're going to touch all these different areas, we need proof you've had comprehensive training. Now, compare that to the more specialized fields.
Right. How do those hours stack up?
Okay, so an esthetician focused on skin needs 750 total hours,
Yeah.
exactly half,
Okay.
with 250 of those being theory hours. And then a nail technician needs just 450 total hours, with 150 theory hours.
Wow. Okay. That massive difference, 1,050 hours, between a nail tech and a full cosmetologist, that really highlights how the state views the risk, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Cutting hair, using strong chemicals versus just nails.
Precisely. And remember that limited stylist we talked about.
Yeah.
That license, only 300 total hours with 100 lecture hours.
300 versus 1,500.
See? The required time tracks almost perfectly with how much or how little the state legally allows you to do.
Makes sense.
And there are even thresholds for students. Like a cosmetology student can't do chemical services on the public until they've logged 250 hours of instruction. You need that theory base first.
Okay. So hours are logged, then comes the exam. The passing score is 70% for most licenses, but instructors need higher scores.
That's right. Instructors need 80% on theory and 85% on practical.
Higher bar. Makes sense.
Yeah, they need to be masters, right?
Yeah.
What's interesting, though, is the retake policy. It's pretty forgiving. Applicants can retake the tests as many times as they need to. You just have to wait a month after you get your failure notice. It kind of removes that crazy pressure of one single make-or-break test day.
That seems fair. Okay, this brings us to something that's a huge deal for professionals.
Mm-hmm.
Moving between states. Mobility.
Big issue.
Traditionally, if you were licensed in, say, Kentucky and moved to Ohio, it could be a nightmare, right? Extra classes if the hours didn't line up perfectly.
Yeah, reciprocity rules could be really cumbersome. The board can still grant licenses if your home state had comparable requirements, like 1,500 hours for cosmetology. That helps smooth things out sometimes.
But there's something newer trying to fix this more broadly.
Yes. The big development is the Cosmetology Licensure Compact.
Okay, the compact. This is supposed to make licenses more portable.
Exactly. Its whole purpose is to create a multi-state license. This is a huge deal, especially aimed at helping people who have to move often, like active military members and their spouses.
Oh.
Instead of jumping through hoops and proving their 1,500 hours every single time they relocate, their license essentially travels with them.
That sounds much better. But wait, the local states, they still want to control safety within their borders, right? So if I have this multi-state license and I mess up in a state that isn't my home state, who disciplines me?
That's the really interesting tension the compact sets up. Your home state, the one that issued your main license, they have the exclusive power over any major actions against the multi-state license itself. If they revoke it, it's gone everywhere.
Okay.
But the remote state, the state where you're currently practicing, they keep the authority to discipline your authorization to practice just within their borders. For local rule violations, like sanitation slip-ups or breaking a specific state law.
So the local guys can still stop you from working there if you break their rules, even if they can't kill your overall license.
Exactly. It ensures local safety standards are still enforced. Which leads us nicely into segment 3, protecting the public. All about those strict practice rules and what you absolutely cannot do.
Right. This is where it stops being about hours and starts being about actual physical safety protocols on the salon floor.
Yeah, and the rules get incredibly specific. There's a code of ethics, for starters.
What does that cover, generally?
It says licensees have to provide competent services Be clear about what they're doing and what it costs. Follow all the sanitation rules, do proper consultations, discuss realistic results with clients, basic professionalism and safety.
Okay, let's talk sanitation because the regulations lay out this mandatory, multi-step process for cleaning tools, right? For non-porous things used on people. It sounds almost like a pre-flight checklist.
That's a great analogy. It really is. You cannot skip a step. Step 1, clean. Physically get all the debris off with soap or detergent.
Okay,
Step 2, rinse and dry. Step 3, the critical one, disinfect. This means total immersion, or the tool has to stay visibly wet for the required contact time.
Contact time.
Yeah, the time listed on the disinfectant label needed to actually kill everything.
Right.
And you have to use an EPA-registered disinfectant that kills bacteria, viruses, and fungi.
Okay, broad spectrum. Then what?
Step 4, rinse and dry again. Got to get that chemical residue off. And finally, step 5, storage. Keep the clean tools in a clean, closed container that's clearly labeled disinfected or ready to use.
Yeah, non-negotiable process.
Absolutely. And that super strict focus on safety is why certain chemicals are just banned outright.
Like what? What's totally forbidden?
Well, for nail services specifically, 2 chemicals are completely banned because they're toxic or cause bad allergic reactions. Methacrylate acid, or MMA, and isobonyl methacrylate, IBMA. These were sometimes found in cheaper, older nail products, but nope, totally banned now for safety.
And there are tool bans too, right? This brings up that weird contradiction we saw in the source documents. What can't you use on skin?
Okay, yeah, this is interesting. Blades meant for cutting the skin are universally prohibited. That's a general rule.
Makes sense.
But here's where it gets tricky. The administrative regulation, the specific rule book, prohibits things like credo blades, rasps, and graters for removing calluses. It classifies them all as blades for cutting the skin.
Wait, but I remember seeing that the main law, the KRS statute itself, actually seemed to allow callus graters. But then the regulation bans them? How does that work?
Exactly. It's a perfect example of regulatory layers. The main statute might allow something broadly, but the administrative board, the ones focused on day-to-day public health and safety, they can step in and restrict specific tools if they think they're too risky.
So as a professional, which rule do you follow?
You always follow the strictest rule, which is usually the administrative regulation. So enough graders, even if the statute seems to allow them elsewhere.
Okay, good to know. If we shift back to skincare aesthetics, those rules seem maybe most restrictive, especially about how deep you can go.
They really are. Standard estheticians are strictly prohibited from using any procedure that pierces the skin beyond the basal layer of the epidermis.
Basal layer. Okay, translate that.
Basically the deepest layer of your outermost skin. Anything that causes bleeding or goes down into the lower dermis. Completely off limits for a standard esthetician.
Got it. And the chemical rules are super specific too, right? Often mentioning things like pH levels.
Oh yeah, extremely specific. For basic estheticians doing like limited chemical peels or exfoliation, the limits are razor sharp. They can only use alpha hydroxy acids, AHAs, those are the common milder ones like glycolic or lactic acid, at a concentration of 30% or less. And crucially, the product must have a pH of not less than 3.0.
Why that specific pH number? Why 3.0?
Because pH measures acidity, its strength. A pH below 3.0 means the acid is significantly stronger. It carries a much higher risk of causing a chemical burn, and managing that safely requires more advanced, usually medical, training.
So anything stronger needs?
What? Anything stronger, like phenol peels or trichloroacetic acid, TCA, above a 15% concentration, requires the direct supervision of a licensed healthcare practitioner, doctor, nurse practitioner, someone like that. The state draws a very hard line there on chemical risk.
Direct supervision, meaning they're right there?
Not necessarily right there, but overseeing the procedure according to medical standards. Now, contrast that with something like microneedling.
Right, the little needles for collagen. Where does that fall?
That falls under the ultimate restriction. Microneedling is strictly prohibited unless it's performed under the immediate supervision of a licensed physician.
Immediate supervision.
Means the physician has to be physically present in the same room, overseeing the procedure the entire time.
Wow. Okay. That sends a clear signal. The state views that as basically a medical procedure with significant risk.
Absolutely.
So pulling this all together, what does this mean for everyone involved? We've seen these really precise numerical guardrails for getting into the profession, 1,500 hours, 70% exam scores, and then incredibly detailed safety rules for actually doing the job, that 5-step disinfection, the specific pH limits on acids.
Yeah, the whole system is really designed to create clear accountability and ultimately minimize any harm to the public. And overseeing all of this, from issuing licenses to investigating complaints, that's the job of the independent Kentucky Board of Cosmetology.
And they enforce these rules. What happens if you break them?
Oh yeah, they enforce them. Practicing without a license, that's a Class B misdemeanor. Other violations can bring fines, pretty hefty ones, up to $1,500 per violation.
Okay, so it paints a picture of an industry that's really heavily regulated, all in the name of keeping consumers safe.
Definitely.
But we started this talking about mobility, the new compact trying to make licenses portable, and we ended up talking about hyper-local rules about specific callus graders and exact acid pH levels.
That's the tension, isn't it? You have this push for national uniformity and portability with a compact's multi-state license. But at the same time, you have these local administrative bodies maintaining really rigid, detailed control over how you practice day to day, like that mandatory minimum pH of 3.0 for AHAs in Kentucky. Another state might have a slightly different rule.
So here's the final thought we want to leave you with, something to chew on. That professional who now has a portable license, good in multiple states, how do they actually navigate all these dozens of incredibly specific, sometimes even contradictory, local rules about what's considered safe practice? Rules about tools, about chemical concentrations that can differ quite a bit from state A to state B. How do they do that without accidentally tripping over a local regulation?
It really is the ultimate professional tightrope walk, isn't it?
Yeah.
Balancing that national mobility with adherence to hyperlocal safety law. Something to definitely mull over until our next deep dive.